The kiss lasted no more than 3 seconds. But in Hollywood, 3 seconds is a lifetime. It happened on a Tuesday evening in the autumn of 1958 at Chasen's restaurant on Beverly Boulevard. The kind of place where the leather booth smelled of money and old ambition, with a maitre d' near name before you spoke it, and where the wrong moment could follow a man for the rest of his career. John Wayne saw it. He was sitting less than 8 feet away, and the man doing the kissing, leaning across the white linen tablecloth with that slow, easy confidence the world had come to recognize, was Dean Martin. The woman receiving it was Pilar Wayne, John's wife. She smiled. That was the part that would haunt him, not the kiss, not Dean's hand resting on Pilar's bare shoulder, fingers pressing just slightly too long into warm skin. It was a smile she gave afterward, soft, private, the kind of smile a woman doesn't manufacture for public consumption, the kind that comes from somewhere deeper. John Wayne did not move. He sat perfectly still in that booth, his glass of bourbon suspended halfway between the table and his lips, the amber liquid catching the candlelight like something on fire. The conversation around him, the laughter, the clinking glass, the low rumble of Hollywood's most powerful voices at play, became a distant underwater sound. His jaw tightened. His eyes, those pale blue eyes that stared down villains on 1,000 cinema screens, stayed fixed on Dean Martin's face. And Dean Martin, for the briefest fraction of a second, looked back at him. Then Dean laughed, that easy musical laugh that made audiences love him. That laugh that said nothing means anything, pal, we're all just having fun, and turned back to his own table. John Wayne set his glass down very carefully. He did not break it. That, in the years that followed, would be described as the most remarkable act of restraint in the history of Hollywood. Because what nobody in that restaurant knew, what nobody in the world knew yet, was that this moment had been building for 18 months, and it was about a tier 3 lives apart. To understand what that moment meant to John Wayne, you first have to understand what it cost to become John Wayne. His real name was Marion Robert Morrison, a fact he despised with a passion usually reserved for communists and bad scripts. He was born in Winterset, Iowa, in 1907. The son of pharmacists who dreamed bigger than his circumstances allowed, and a mother who made sure her son felt the weight of every disappointment she ever suffered. Marion grew up with a chip on his shoulder the size of the Rocky Mountains. He was large from a young age, broad to the chest, heavy in the jaw, and learned early that size without purpose just makes you a bigger target. The boys in his school called him a sissy name. He fought back. He kept fighting. That was essentially the foundational story of John Wayne. Finding something that offended his dignity and refusing to yield. He got to USC on a football scholarship and caught the eye of director John Ford when he was hauling furniture on a studio lot. Ford put him in front of the camera, watched what happened, and said the famous words, "Walk slower. You're not in a hurry. You own the place." It was the best direction anyone ever gave Marion Morrison. By 1939, with Stagecoach, he had become John Wayne. Not just a name, but an idea. The man who couldn't be broken. The man who absorbed punishment the way the desert absorbs rain, without changing his essential nature. On screen, John Wayne stood for something unambiguous. Strength without cruelty, pride without arrogance, loyalty unto death. Off screen, the truth was more complicated. He had been married twice before Pilar. He was a difficult man, demanding, suspicious, quick to take offense, slower to forgive. He loved with a fierce, almost suffocating intensity, and expected that intensity returned in full. His first 2 wives had not managed it, or perhaps he had not allowed them to. When he met Pilar Wayne in 1952, she was Peruvian, beautiful in a way that stopped conversations, 23 years younger than him. He told a friend, "I've found the one who won't leave." It was not exactly a romantic declaration, but it told you everything about the man's deepest terror. John Wayne, who had faced down celluloid outlaws and real-life studio executives with equal composure, was fundamentally afraid of being left. And in the autumn of 1958, watching Dean Martin kiss his wife, that fear put on its boots and walked straight to the front door of his chest. Nobody in the world disliked Dean Martin. This was not an accident. It was, in a sense, the most sophisticated performance of his career. Born Dino Paul Crocetti in Steubenville, Ohio, Dean Martin was the son of Italian immigrants who understood early that charm was the most efficient tool available to a poor man. While other people worked hard, Dino worked smooth. He could walk into a room where everyone already hated him and leave with 3 new friends and a dinner invitation. He had partnered with Jerry Lewis for a decade, the lovable drunk and the beloved lunatic, and together they had made millions and filled theaters coast to coast. When that partnership collapsed in 1956, with a bitterness that surprised everyone who thought they understood it, the industry consensus was that Martin was finished. Lewis was the talent. Martin was the vehicle. They were wrong. What followed was one of the most elegant reinventions in Hollywood history. Dean Martin stepped out of Lewis's shadow, stopped being the straight man, and revealed himself to be something rarer and more dangerous, a genuinely gifted entertainer with the ability to make everything look effortless. By 1958, his recording career was exploding. His film work was generating real respect, not just numbers, but respect, the currency that actually mattered in that town. And he was the warm center of what was beginning to coalesce in the Rat Pack, that loose constellation of Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., Peter Lawford, and Martin himself, who gathered around each other like moths around flame, or perhaps more accurately, like men who recognized in each other's shared understanding that life was short and the party was a point. He and John Wayne had been friendly for years, not close friends. Their personalities were too different for that. Wayne's stubborn seriousness always slightly at odds with Martin's floating irreverence. But colleagues in a way that enduring Hollywood careers make of everyone colleagues. They had mutual respect. They had traded favors. They had sat at adjacent tables at industry events and laughed at each other's jokes. What they did not have, as it turned out, was the honest conversation that might have prevented everything that followed. Here is what the gossip columns never quite captured about Pilar Wayne. She was not a victim. This is important to say clearly, because the story that was about to unfold would be retold many times, in many ways, and in most of those retellings, Pilar would occupy the passive center, the beautiful object around which powerful men circled and collided. That was not who she was. Pilar Pallid had grown up in Lima, in a family of modest means but enormous ambition. She had worked as an actress in Peruvian cinema, had learned to navigate environments dominated by men who underestimated her, and had developed, over the years, a precise and private intelligence that she rarely displayed in public because she had learned, as women of her era invariably learned, that displaying intelligence in the wrong company was an invitation to diminishment. She loved John Wayne. This was not a complicated or qualified fact. She loved him with the full comprehension of who he was, including the parts that were difficult, the jealousy that lived in him like a second tenant, the silences that could last days, the way his pride operated sometimes as a wall between them rather than a bridge. But she was also, in the autumn of 1958, lonely in a way she couldn't quite articulate to her husband without the conversation becoming about his inadequacy, which was not what she intended. John Wayne was, by this point, the biggest star in the world, which meant he was almost never home. And in that absence, people filled the space. Hollywood people, interesting people, people who listened. Dean Martin listened. This is the detail that gets lost in the dramatic retelling. The kiss, the jealous husband, the dangerous triangle. What actually preceded all of it was much simpler and much more devastating. Dean Martin had spent 6 months being a good conversationalist to a lonely woman. He wasn't pursuing her. Or perhaps he was, in that half-conscious way that charming men pursue every interesting woman they encounter, not out of specific desire, but out of a generalized habit of making themselves appealing. He made her laugh. He asked about her life in Peru. He remembered small things, the name of her sister, a film she'd mentioned admiring, a flavor of ice cream she'd once said was her favorite. These were not grand gestures. They were tiny, consistent signals of attention. To a woman whose husband was currently on location in Utah, being John Wayne for 12 hours a day, they felt like water in a desert. Nothing had happened between them, not physically. This is crucial. But something had grown in the space between them. A warmth, a particular frequency of understanding, that in the right light, at the wrong moment, could look like something it wasn't. And Chasen's restaurant on a Tuesday evening in October 1958 turned out to be exactly the wrong moment. John Wayne did not confront Dean Martin that night. He went home instead. He drove himself unusual, He almost always had someone drive him, but tonight he needed the physical act of controlling something. The wheel in his hands, the gear shift responding to his grip. He drove too fast on Sunset Boulevard, changed lanes without signaling, pushed through a yellow light that was almost red. A lesser driver would have caused an accident. The house was dark when he got there. The housekeeper had left hours ago. The children were with Wayne's sister for the week. He went to the kitchen and poured 3 fingers of bourbon. Then he stood at the kitchen window and stared at the lights of Los Angeles spreading out below the hillside. All those lit windows, all those private dramas, all those marriages in various states of health and decay. And he tried to think clearly. He was not a man who processed emotion quickly. This was both his greatest strength and his most profound limitation. In a crisis, John Wayne did not panic. He stilled. He became deliberate and slow in a way that people sometimes mistook for calm, but was actually something closer to controlled suppression of everything churning underneath. He stood at that window for 40 minutes before he heard Pilar's car in the driveway. She came in through the side door, dropping her wrap on a chair in the hallway, and stopped when she saw him standing in the kitchen in the dark with his glass. "John," she said, not alarmed. "Careful. How was your evening?" His voice was level. Enormous effort behind that level. "Fine." A beat. Ran into some people at Chasen's. Had a drink at their table. Dean Martin's table. A pause that lasted slightly too long. He was there, yes, with some of his friends. She moved to the refrigerator, opened it, looked in at nothing. It was brief. "He kissed you." She closed the refrigerator, turned around, met his eyes. "On the cheek," she said. It was a greeting. "You smiled." "John." Not a social smile. He set his glass down. Not the smile you give at parties. The other one. Pilar Wayne was brave, but she was not reckless. She understood precisely what was happening in this kitchen and what the next words out of her mouth would determine. Not just for tonight, for months to come. She made a choice. "I don't know what you think you saw," she said quietly, "but there is nothing between Dean Martin and me except a friendly acquaintance. If my expression offended you, I'm sorry. I wasn't aware I needed to monitor my facial expressions in public." It was the right answer. It was also not quite the truth. Not because she was hiding an affair. She wasn't. But because the smile he had seen was real, and they both knew it. And denying its realness was a small but important lie of omission that would nest in the space between them for a long time. Wayne picked up his glass and walked past her toward the stairs. "We'll talk tomorrow," he said. They did not talk tomorrow. For days later, Frank Sinatra called John Wayne. This was not unusual. They were friends along standing. The kind of friendship built on mutual respect between powerful men who operated in overlapping orbits without directly competing. Sinatra called frequently, about nothing in particular. A new record he was proud of, an opinion on a script, an invitation to a party at his place in Palm Springs. The calls were brief and casual, and usually ended with plans that were only loosely kept. This call was different from the first word. "I need to talk to you about something," Frank said, and there was none of the usual ease in his voice. Wayne switched the phone to his other hand. "I'm listening." "Not on the phone." A pause. "Can you come by tonight?" "Just you." They met at Sinatra's house in Holmby Hills at 9. The staff was dismissed. Sinatra poured 2 scotches and sat across from Wayne in the living room with an expression that Wayne had seen precisely twice in all the years he'd known the man. The expression Frank wore when he was about to say something that cost him. "There's talk," Frank said. Wayne said nothing. "About Pilar." Frank held his gaze. "And Dean." "What kind of talk?" "The Hollywood kind, which means it's everywhere." Frank leaned forward. "I want you to know I've told people to shut their mouths. And I want you to know I don't believe what they're saying. Dean's an idiot sometimes, but he's not." He stopped. "He's not that kind of idiot." "What are they saying exactly?" Frank told him. It was worse than Wayne had imagined, not in its specifics. The specifics were vague, as Hollywood rumors always were, built more from suggestion than substance. But in its geography, the rumor was everywhere. It had been everywhere for weeks, apparently. Wayne was among the last to hear it. because he was John Wayne, and people did not bring bad news to men who might shoot the messenger. He drove home that night in a state that was beyond anger, past it, into something colder and more dangerous. He did not go to bed. He sat in his study with the lights off until 3 a.m, and he made a decision. He was going to confront Dean Martin. He called Martin's house the next morning and left a message with the housekeeper. The message was 5 words. John Wayne. He needs to talk. Dean called back within the hour. Whatever else you might say about Dean Martin, he was not a coward. He had grown up in a tough town, run numbers as a teenager, worked bars where real violence was an occasional feature of the evening. He had a radar for serious situations, and he did not mistake this one. "Duke," he said. "Just that. Quiet. I think you know why I'm calling. I've heard some things." "So have I." Wayne let that sit for a moment. "I'd rather hear your version." They met at a small bar in the valley. Not their usual territory, not a place where they'd be recognized and interrupted. It was mid-afternoon, nearly empty. They took a corner booth, ordered nothing, and looked at each other across the table. Dean Martin looked tired in a way that his public face never showed. There were circles under his eyes, a tightness around his jaw. "I'm going to tell you the truth," Dean said, "because I owe you that." "I'm waiting." Dean was quiet for a moment. Then, "I think I fell in love with your wife." The word thing was doing an enormous amount of work in that sentence. Wayne's hands were flat on the table. He kept them flat. "Nothing happened." Dean continued. "I need you to believe that. Whatever you've heard, nothing physical happened between us. Not once. But she's... Duke. She's remarkable. And I think she's been lonely. And He stopped, rubbed his face with both hands. "I wasn't careful enough about the line. I let something grow that I should have shut down. I should have been smarter. I wasn't. You kissed my wife. On the cheek. At a restaurant. That was stupid. I knew you were there. I should have. You knew I was there." Dean Martin met his eyes. "Yes." There was a long silence. "Why?" Wayne's voice was very quiet. In a career full of dangerous, quiet voices, this was the most dangerous. Dean seemed to hear that. He sat back slightly. "Because I was drunk and I was stupid, and for about 30 seconds I forgot to be careful. That's the truth. There's no deeper motive. I wasn't trying to. It wasn't a message. It was a mistake." Wayne looked at him for a long time. "You said you fell in love with her." I said, "I think." Dean's voice was careful now. "I think I convinced myself of something because she listened to me and she was kind to me and I've been in a difficult place and..." He stopped again. "I think I fell in love with the way she made me feel. That's different from loving her. I know that now." "Does she know?" A pause. "I never told her." "Does she feel the same way?" A longer pause. "I don't know," Dean said. And that's the honest answer. I genuinely don't know. What happened next was not caused by John Wayne or Dean Martin. It was caused by a gossip columnist named Vera Collins, a woman who had spent 15 years making a comfortable living trafficking in the private lives of people more famous than herself, and who had the misfortune of having an excellent source at Chasen's. The source had seen the kiss. The source had also seen the exchange of looks between Wayne and Martin afterward. The source had heard, or claimed to have heard, raised voices from the direction of Dean Martin's table following John Wayne's departure. The source gave Vera Collins a story, and Vera Collins gave the story to her editor, and the editor made the calculation that the words John Wayne and Dean Martin, an unfaithful wife, in the same headline were worth any legal consequences that might follow. The piece ran on a Thursday. By Friday morning, it was in every publication that mattered. By Saturday, it was international. The story, as printed, was technically careful. It named no names in its most damaging passages, spoke of a major Western star and a famous entertainer, and left the reader to do the arithmetic that the headline had already done for them. But the photograph that ran alongside it was precise enough. Dean Martin and Pilar Wayne, laughing together at a party from 3 months prior, his hand on her arm, her face turned toward him at an angle that could be read whatever way you needed to read it. John Wayne saw the story at 6 a.m, brought to him with his coffee by his assistant, who set it on the table without a word and left the room immediately. He read it twice, then he put it face down on the table and went and woke up Pilar. She read it sitting in bed, still in her nightgown, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. She read it once, and then she put it down, and she looked at her husband standing in the doorway of their bedroom. "This is going to follow us everywhere," she said. "Quiet, not a question." "Yes." She was silent for a moment. Then, "What do you want to do?" And here is where John Wayne surprised everyone who thought they had him figured out. "I want to know the truth," he said. "All of it, not the magazine version. Not the version you tell me to keep the peace. The truth." Pilar looked at him for a long time. "I think," she said finally, "that you're going to need to sit down." She told him about the loneliness first. She told him about the months he spent away, the weeks when the only adult conversation she had was with a housekeeper or the wives of other stars at parties, where she was always John Wayne's wife, never quite herself. She told him about the way Hollywood parties felt like performances, even when they were supposed to be leisure. She told him about lying awake at 3 a.m. listening to the house settle, and missing him with a specific physical ache that she had never quite found the words for. She told him that Dean Martin had made her laugh in a way that she'd forgotten she could laugh, that he'd asked about Peru and actually wanted to hear the answer, that he had a quality of full attention, a rare quality, rarer in Hollywood than elsewhere, that made whoever he was talking to feel temporarily like the most interesting person in the room. She told him that she hadn't been in love with Dean Martin. She told him she had been in love with what Dean Martin represented, the uncomplicated version of being seen, without the weight of being John Wayne's wife, without the scrutiny and the expectation, and the enormous, silent pressure of being married to a legend. "I was never going to leave you," she said. "I need you to understand that. I never considered it. But you enjoyed his company more than mine. In some ways, in the way you enjoy a vacation more than your home. It doesn't mean your home is wrong." That analogy landed hard. John Wayne sat with it. "Why didn't you tell me you were lonely?" "Because every time I tried, it became a conversation about your schedule and your career, and eventually about your sacrifices, and I always ended up in the position of seeming ungrateful for everything you'd given me." She said it without accusation. She said it like a person reading a fact from a document. "I stopped trying when, about a year ago." He was quiet for a long time. The morning light was coming to windows now, hitting the edge of the bed, moving slowly across the floor between them. "I didn't know," he said. "I know you didn't. I should have." "Yes." More silence. "Dean Martin," Wayne said finally. "Did you?" "No." Clear and immediate. "No. Never." He looked at her. "Never," she said again. "I swear to you." He believed her. This was the most important moment of the entire story, and the least dramatic. It was just a man looking at his wife and deciding to trust what he saw on her face, over and above everything he'd read in a newspaper, and everything he'd been told at a dinner table by a man who admitted he'd let himself get too close. He believed her. And then he went to pick up the phone, because there was still one conversation left to have. Wayne called Martin at 8 a.m. Martin answered himself. He'd clearly been awake. "I've talked to Pilar," Wayne said. Martin said nothing. "I'm going to say something to you, and I want you to listen to all of it before you respond." "All right. You were careless with something that mattered to me. You let something grow that you should have ended. You kissed my wife in public, knowing I was watching, which I don't fully believe was as accidental as you claimed." He paused. "And you've been honest with me about it, which is the only reason I'm calling instead of doing something I'd regret." Martin was quiet. "She's not in love with you," Wayne said. "I know you heard what you wanted to hear in that, but I'm saying it clearly. Whatever you felt, she doesn't feel the same way, and she never would have." "I know," Martin said very quietly. "Then I want you to understand something. I'm not your enemy. I'm not going to go to the press. I'm not going to make this into a story. But you and I, we are not what we were, and if you're smart, you'll give us space for a while." "Duke, I'm not finished. A beat. The rumor is out there. It's going to be out there for a long time. We're going to have to live in the same town and work in the same industry. And we're both going to be asked about this at every event and every interview for the next year. I want us to agree on what we say." "What do you want to say?" "That it's nothing. that it was a greeting between friends, and the press turned it into something it wasn't, that we've spoken about it, and there's nothing more to discuss. Martin was silent for a moment. That's generous, he said. It's strategic. Wayne said, Pilar doesn't deserve to be the subject of this story. My marriage doesn't deserve to be the subject of this story. If it's about you and me, two stubborn men who had a misunderstanding, it goes away faster. And you and me? A long pause. Time, Wayne said. Maybe. I don't know. He took a breath. You're a better man than this, Dean. Don't do it again. He hung up. What followed was a masterclass in public management of private damage. At the next major event, a charity gala in mid-November, John Wayne and Dean Martin appeared on the same red carpet within minutes of each other. They were photographed shaking hands. Both men were smiling. Neither smile reached the eyes of the man who generated it. But the cameras didn't know that, and the following morning's papers had the image they needed to rewrite the story. All good between Duke and Dino, said the headline. Hollywood friends put rumors to rest. It worked. Not immediately. These things never resolve immediately. For several months, the whispers continued in the specific corners of Hollywood that survive on whispers. But the public face held. And the public face in Hollywood is the only face that matters to history. Vera Collins wrote a follow-up piece suggesting the reconciliation was staged. Nobody read it with particular interest. The moment had passed. Frank Sinatra, who had been watching all of this with a careful attention he brought to anything involving his closest friends, called Wayne a week after the gala. You handled that well, he said. I handled it the way Pilar asked me to. Wayne said, a beat. She's something. Sinatra said, she's everything. Wayne said, I keep forgetting that when I'm working. I'm going to try to stop forgetting. It was not a promise he kept perfectly. Men like John Wayne don't make perfect promises about things that run against the grain of their nature. He went back to Utah 3 weeks later. He was on location for another film 2 months after that, but something had changed. The conversations got longer. The calls home from location, previously functional and brief schedules and logistical necessities, became something else. He started asking questions he hadn't thought to ask before. He listened to the answers. It was not a transformation. It was more like the slow correction of a ship that has drifted slightly off course. Degrees rather than revolutions. But degrees, over time, add up. Here is the part of this story that tends to get forgotten in the telling. What happened to Dean Martin? In the months following the episode of Chasen's, Martin went through a period of uncharacteristic withdrawal. He showed up to obligations, performed, recorded, appeared, but the inner light that made him Dean Martin seemed to operate at lower wattage. His close friends noticed. Sinatra noticed. Peter Lawford noticed. He didn't talk about it. He was constitutionally opposed to the kind of emotional exposition that the moment seemed to call for. He was a man who processed things through music and through motion, through the next project, the next performance, the next room full of people he could make laugh. But occasionally, in the company of someone he trusted, in the small hours of a long night, a different Dean Martin would surface briefly. He told Sinatra once that he thought he'd use Pilar Wayne as a mirror, a way of seeing a version of himself that was better than the one he actually lived with. I wasn't in love with her, he said. I was in love with the way I behaved around her, which is, I don't know, worse, maybe. Sinatra, who had his own complicated history with love and its discontent, said nothing for a moment. Then, the good news is you figured out before it cost you more than it did. Depends how you count, Dean said. He was thinking of John Wayne's face in that restaurant. That particular stillness. That image would stay with him for years. It would change slightly how he approached the rest of his life. Not dramatically, not in the ways that make for neat character arcs, but in the specific, interior way that genuine moments of reckoning always change a person. He became, by small increments, more careful about the lines between warmth and something that could be mistaken for it. He became, by small increments, more honest with himself about what he actually wanted. This is not nothing. In a life as vivid and as occasionally chaotic as Dean Martin's, small increments of honesty were a significant achievement. 2 years passed. In those 2 years, John Wayne made 3 more films, won a Golden Globe, and added a wing to his house. Pilar traveled back to Peru for the first time in years to visit her family. She came back looking lighter, like a woman who had set down something heavy and found she could breathe more easily. Their marriage survived. Not merely survived. Something shifted in it, became more honest, less armored. The loneliness that Pilar had described never entirely disappeared, but it was no longer secret. Wayne knew about it now, and knowing is a form of presence even when the body is absent. They fought more, actually, which was paradoxically an improvement. The fighting meant they were saying things they had previously swallowed. It meant trust had returned to the level where conflict was possible without catastrophe. In the winter of 1960, at a party at Sinatra's house in Palm Springs, John Wayne and Dean Martin found themselves standing next to each other at the bar. It was the first time they'd been truly alone together in 2 years. Martin looked at his glass. Wayne looked straight ahead. Around them, the party hummed along its usual frequency. "How's Pilar?" Martin asked. "Good," Wayne said. Then, after a moment, "We're good." Martin nodded. "I owe you an apology," Martin said. "A real one, not the managed version. You gave me a real one 2 years ago. I gave you a controlled one. There's a difference." Wayne looked at him sideways. "I was selfish," Martin said. "I knew what I was doing, even when I told myself I didn't. I was lonely and I was stupid and I took something from you without your permission, your wife's time, her attention. I took up space that was yours, and I dressed it up as friendship." He paused. "I'm sorry." John Wayne was quiet for a long moment. Then, "You know what I realized? I left space for you to move into. That's on me as much as it's on you." Martin looked at him. "I was so busy being John Wayne," Wayne said, and there was something wry and sad in the way he said name, as if referring to someone he both admired and pitied, "that I forgot to be Pilar's husband. You didn't take anything. I set it down." A pause. "That's generous," Martin said. "That's true," Wayne said. "There's a difference." They stood at the bar for another moment. Then Wayne raised his glass slightly and Martin raised his, and they drank. It was not a restoration of what they'd had before. Some things, once broken, reassembled differently. Not worse necessarily, but changed in their architecture. They remained cordial, professionally respectful, occasionally warm. The old, easy friendship never fully returned. But something was acknowledged that night that needed to be acknowledged. And in Hollywood, acknowledgement is its own form of grace. The photograph is still out there in the archives. Dean Martin kissing Pilar Wayne on the cheek at Chasen's restaurant, October 1958, while John Wayne sits 8 feet away holding a glass of bourbon. It's a beautiful photograph, actually. The light is warm. The restaurant is full of elegantly dressed people caught in small, private moments of happiness. Dean Martin looks charming because he always looked charming. Pilar looks lovely because she always was. John Wayne is slightly out of focus in the background. This is a detail that stays with you when you look at the photograph closely. The most famous man in the room, and the camera didn't quite catch him. He's there, though, if you look. Jaw tight, glass suspended, eyes absolutely fixed on the center of the frame. The photograph shows you the kiss. What it can't show you is the marriage that survived it. The conversations at 3 in the morning. The calls from location that went longer than they needed to. The small, daily choices that a man makes when he decides that being present is more important than being legendary. What it can't show you is John Wayne learning, at 51 years old, that the bravest thing he would ever do was not riding across Monument Valley or facing down a room full of armed men. It was sitting across from his wife in their kitchen at 6 in the morning and saying, "Tell me the truth, all of it," and then staying in the room while she did. Here is what Hollywood thought it saw that night: a dangerous triangle. A famous man's ego threatened. A moment of masculine pride about to combust. Here's what was actually happening. 3 people discovering, simultaneously and painfully, the cost of the stories they had been telling themselves. Pilar had been telling herself that loneliness was the price of the life she'd chosen, and that the price was fixed. Dean Martin had been telling himself that charm was the same thing as connection, and that warmth given freely was the same thing as love. John Wayne had been telling himself that being irreplaceable professionally was the same thing as being indispensable personally. All 3 of them were wrong. The kiss was not the story. The kiss was just a moment when the stories stopped working. There's a version of this night that ends differently, with courtroom proceedings and tabloid wars and careers in ruins. Hollywood has told that version many times, with different names and different faces. This version ends at a bar at a party in Palm Springs. Two men raising their glasses in the direction of something they both lost and found again in different proportions. This version ends with Pilar Wayne on a plane to Lima, looking out the window at the Pacific Ocean below, carrying the lightness of someone who has finally said the true thing to the person who most needed to hear it. This version ends with John Wayne on the phone from a location in the Mojave Desert at 10 o'clock at night, asking his wife how her day was, not as a courtesy, not as a performance of the attentive husband, but because he genuinely, urgently wanted to know. She told him. He listened. The camera wasn't there for that part, but that was the part that mattered. The bravest thing a strong man can do is admit he's been absent from the room he claims to own, and then learn slowly, painstakingly, how to actually be present in it. John Wayne rode across 1,000 movie screens, facing down every villain the script could throw at him. The one thing that nearly broke him was a 3-second kiss and the smile that followed it. And the thing that saved him? Asking the question he'd been afraid to ask for years, and learning to stay for the answer. And